I gave them 20 years of my life. Every late night, every sacrificed weekend, every ounce of loyalty I had to give. 20 years of building their empire, solving their crises, making them millions. And how did they repay me? With a cold dismissal letter and a security escort to the parking lot. They thought they were cutting dead weight, streamlining operations. But what they really did was create their own worst nightmare. Because now I work for their biggest competitor, and I know every secret, every weakness, every vulnerability they have. My name is Clara Dawson, and until 6 months ago, I thought I'd retire from Northwell Dynamics. I was 42 years old, had been with the company since I was 22, fresh out of Northwestern with an engineering degree and dreams bigger than the Chicago skyline. Rockford Heights, this mid-sized city in the heart of the Midwest, had become my entire world. It wasn't glamorous like Silicon Valley or cutting-edge like Boston, but it was home to one of the country's most important defense technology contractors. And I'd helped build it into what it was. I started as a junior project coordinator in 2003 when Northwell was still operating out of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. Back then, we had maybe 50 employees. I remember the excitement of landing our first major Pentagon contract. The champagne CEO Marcus Brennan bought for the entire team. Real champagne, not the cheap stuff. I remember working 70-hour weeks without complaint because I believed in what we were building. I believed in the promise that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded. Over 2 decades, I climbed every rung of that corporate ladder, project coordinator to project manager to senior project manager to director of project development. Each promotion felt earned, each raise justified by the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into that company. I missed birthdays, canceled vacations, postponed dating, and then postponed marriage, and then postponed children until it was too late for all of it. But Northwell was my family. Or so I told myself. The company grew around me. That warehouse became a gleaming 15-story glass tower in downtown Rockford Heights. Those 50 employees became 5,000. Those small defense contracts became billion-dollar deals that shaped national security policy. And through it all, I was there, in the trenches, making sure every deadline was met, every specification exceeded, every client satisfied. I knew every system, every protocol, every unwritten rule that made Northwell tick. I knew which Pentagon officials preferred their briefings with military precision and which ones wanted the casual approach. I knew which suppliers could be trusted to deliver on time and which ones needed constant supervision. I knew where every body was buried, metaphorically speaking, every shortcut taken, every corner cut, every promise made in a back room that kept the machine running smoothly. My apartment, a 2-bedroom in one of those converted loft buildings that sprouted up during Rockford Heights' urban renewal phase, was more like a satellite office. The second bedroom housed filing cabinets full of project histories, whiteboards covered in workflow diagrams, and 3 monitors that stayed connected to Northwell's servers, even on weekends. I'd wake up at 5:30 every morning, check my emails before my first cup of coffee, and often wouldn't close my laptop until near midnight. The younger employees called me the institution behind my back. I knew because nothing stayed secret long in corporate America. They said it mockingly. These kids fresh from their MBAs who thought disruption was more valuable than dedication. But the smart ones, the ones who actually wanted to learn rather than just collect a paycheck, they sought me out. They knew I could teach them things no business school could: how to navigate the complex web of defense contracting, how to speak the language of both engineers and generals, how to turn a project crisis into an opportunity. I thought my value was undeniable. I thought 2 decades of institutional knowledge made me irreplaceable. I thought wrong. Looking back now, I can see the signs I willfully ignored. The consulting firm brought in to optimize operations. The new CFO, 15 years younger than me, who spoke in buzzwords and looked at employees like entries on a spreadsheet. The way conversations stopped when I entered the break room. The subtle shift in Marcus Brennan's demeanor, from treating me as his right hand to barely making eye contact during meetings. But I was Clara Dawson, Director of Project Development, keeper of Northwell's secrets, the woman who'd helped build this company from nothing into something. Surely, they wouldn't dare. The Tuesday that changed everything started like any other. I arrived at 7:15, swiped my keycard at the executive elevator, and rode up to the 14th floor where the director's offices overlooked downtown Rockford Heights. My assistant, Janet, wasn't at her desk yet. Unusual, but not unheard of. I made my own coffee, black with 1 sugar, and settled in to review the quarterly projections for the upcoming board meeting. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. Marcus Brennan's assistant, Mr. Brennan would like to see you in Conference Room A immediately. Conference Room A, not his office where we usually met for one-on-ones. The formal conference room with its long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows. My stomach tightened. But I told myself it was probably about the Singapore expansion we'd been planning. I walked in to find Marcus seated at the head of the table, flanked by the new CFO, Bradley Morrison, and someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 30s with the sharp suit and cold eyes of a corporate executioner. The head of HR, Diane, sat to the left, avoiding my gaze. Clara, please sit, Marcus said, gesturing to a chair that felt miles away from everyone else. 20 years of reading rooms told me everything before anyone spoke. The folder in front of Diane, the security guard visible through the glass door, the way Marcus's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit I'd seen through countless negotiations, but never directed at me. I'll keep this brief, Marcus began, still not meeting my eyes. As you know, Northwell has been undergoing strategic restructuring. After careful consideration, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate the Director of Project Development position. The words hit like physical blows. I heard myself speaking, my voice surprisingly steady. You're eliminating a position that oversees 40% of our active contracts? Bradley Morrison leaned forward, his Yale-class ring catching the morning light. We're distributing those responsibilities across a more agile, lean management structure. 3 junior project managers will report directly to me, allowing for more efficient resource allocation and reduced operational redundancy. Operational redundancy. I was operational redundancy. This is effective immediately. The unknown woman spoke for the first time. I'm Rebecca Chen from Transition Services. We've prepared a severance package, 3 months' pay, continuation of health benefits through year-end, and a positive reference letter. 3 months. 20 years reduced to 3 months. I need you to understand. Marcus finally looked at me. This isn't personal. It's simply business evolution. You've been... He paused, searching for words. Instrumental in getting us here. But the company needs fresh perspectives for where we're going. Fresh perspectives. Code for younger and cheaper. I'd seen the junior project managers he was talking about, kids who couldn't tell a DoD requisition form from a purchase order, who thought military contracting was like selling software to startups. What about the Artemis project? I asked. I'm the only one who knows the general's requirements. The presentation is next week. Kyle and Madison will handle it, Bradley said, referring to 2 employees who'd been with the company less than 18 months. We're confident in their ability to adapt. The rest blurred together, Rebecca Chen sliding papers across the table, the non-disclosure agreement, the non-compete clause that would prevent me from working for any defense contractor for 2 years, unenforceable in most states, but enough to scare away potential employers. The surrender of my keycard, my parking pass, my company laptop that contained 2 decades of my life's work. We'll need you to clear your office immediately, Rebecca said with practiced efficiency. Security will escort you. You have 1 hour to gather personal items. Any company property remains here, including client contacts and project files. I stood, my legs surprisingly steady. 20 years, Marcus, I gave you 20 years. He flinched but said nothing. The walk to my office felt like a funeral procession. Colleagues scattered like roaches when lights turn on, suddenly busy with phone calls or urgent emails. Only Janet met my eyes, tears streaming down her face. Security stood in my doorway as I packed 20 years into a cardboard box. Photos from company Christmas parties, my lucky coffee mug, the plaque commemorating our first billion-dollar contract, the one I'd spent 6 months negotiating. They watched me like I was a criminal, like I might steal the staplers or download classified files. As if I hadn't had 2 decades to do that if I'd wanted to. As if I hadn't protected this company's secrets better than I'd protected my own life. The elevator ride down lasted forever and an instant. The security guard walked me to my car, took my parking pass, and watched me drive away. In my rearview mirror, I saw the Northwell Dynamics Tower gleaming in the morning sun, as imposing and indifferent as a mountain. I made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over. My hands shook too violently to drive. The anger came in waves, pure, burning rage at the injustice of it all. They'd taken my experience, my connections, my innovations, squeezed every drop of value from me, then discarded me like an empty container. But worse than the anger was the humiliation. The security escort. The careful distance everyone kept. The way they'd made me feel like a liability instead of the asset I'd always been. They hadn't just fired me, they'd erased me. The first week after the firing, I didn't leave my apartment. I sat in my living room, still in the same clothes, staring at the wall where my Northwell achievement certificates used to hang. I'd taken them down months ago for reframing and never put them back up. Now they sat in the cardboard box by the door, monuments to a life that no longer existed. My savings account held enough for maybe 6 months if I was careful. The mortgage on the loft consumed nearly $3,000 a month. Health insurance through Cobra would cost $1,800. Then there were utilities, food, gas, the arithmetic of survival that I'd never had to calculate before. At Northwell, I'd earned enough to live without thinking about money. Now every dollar felt like a ticking clock. The emails started on day 3. Former colleagues checking in, their messages dripping with false concern and real curiosity. They wanted to know what I'd done wrong, what landmine I'd stepped on, so they could avoid the same fate. I didn't respond to any of them. My sister called from Denver. "Come stay with us for a while," she offered. The kids would love to see Aunt Clara. But I couldn't bear the pity in her voice, couldn't stomach the idea of showing up on her doorstep like a failure at 42. I told her I was fine, that I had leads, that this was actually an opportunity for something better. The job search began in week 2. I updated my resume, highlighting 2 decades of experience in defense contracting, my security clearance, my track record of managing multi-million-dollar projects. Surely someone would see the value Northwell had discarded. The first rejection came within hours. Position has been filled. The second, looking for someone with more recent experience in agile methodologies. The third didn't even respond. Word traveled fast in defense contracting circles. Clara Dawson, 20-year veteran, fired from Northwell. In this industry, that kind of termination was like a scarlet letter. If Northwell didn't want me, the reasoning went, why should anyone else? I expanded my search beyond defense contractors, manufacturing, logistics, technology firms. But without the specialized knowledge that made me valuable in defense, I was just another middle-aged manager in a market flooded with younger, cheaper options. Week 3 brought the unemployment office. The fluorescent lights and plastic chairs felt like a different planet from Northwell's executive floor. I sat between a laid-off factory worker and a recent college graduate. All of us reduced to the same form, the same weekly benefit amount that wouldn't even cover my mortgage. "Have you considered retraining?" the counselor asked, barely looking up from her screen. "We have programs in medical coding, HVAC repair, commercial driving." I wanted to scream that I had a top-secret security clearance, that I'd briefed generals and senators, that I'd managed budgets larger than some small towns. Instead, I nodded politely and took the brochures. The nights were the worst. I'd wake at 3 a.m. My mind racing through scenarios. What if I'd seen the signs earlier? What if I'd played politics better? What if I'd been less dedicated, less available, less willing to sacrifice everything for a company that saw me as disposable? By week 4, the depression settled in like fog. I stopped checking job boards, stopped answering my phone, stopped pretending that tomorrow would be better. I'd given Northwell my 20s, my 30s, my early 40s, the years when I should have been building a life outside of work. Now I had no network beyond that company, no identity beyond that title, no purpose beyond those projects. I was contemplating selling the loft, maybe moving back to my hometown in Indiana, where the cost of living was lower and the shame might be less visible. When Jake Patterson called, Jake had left Northwell 5 years earlier to become a VP at Redstone Systems, Northwell's primary competitor. We'd worked together on the early Pentagon contracts, back when both of us were young and hungry and stupid enough to believe corporate loyalty went both ways. "Clara, I heard what happened," he said without preamble. "It's their loss and absolute stupidity." "Thanks, Jake, but—" "No buts. I'm not calling to offer sympathy. I'm calling to offer you a job." The words didn't compute at first. The non-compete is garbage and you know it, won't hold up in court, especially not after they terminated you without cause. Besides, we're prepared to make it worth the fight if they try. My heart hammered. What kind of position? Senior Director of Strategic Development. You'd be working directly with me to position Redstone for the next generation of defense contracts. Clara, we need someone who knows Northwell's playbook, someone who understands how they think, how they operate. We need you. The irony was delicious. Northwell had created their own perfect storm. They'd trained me, given me inside knowledge of every strength and weakness, then cast me aside. Now their biggest competitor wanted to weaponize that knowledge against them. "When do I start?" I asked. "Monday, if you can. We have a major contract coming up, the Artemis project, actually. Heard Northwell's struggling with it since they restructured." I smiled for the first time in a month. Kyle and Madison had botched the presentation, just as I'd known they would. The general had been furious, according to Jake's sources. Northwell was scrambling to recover. "I'll see you Monday," I said. That night, I unpacked the cardboard box. But instead of hanging the certificates back up, I threw them in the trash. Clara Dawson, Director of Project Development at Northwell Dynamics, was dead. Clara Dawson, weapon of corporate destruction, was about to be born. Monday morning at Redstone Systems felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Their headquarters sat just 12 miles from Northwell's tower, in the newly developed tech corridor of Rockford Heights. But it might as well have been a different world, where Northwell was all marble and mahogany, corporate tradition carved in stone. Redstone was glass and steel, open floor plans and standing desks, energy that crackled through the air like electricity. Jake Patterson met me in the lobby, his smile genuine in a way Marcus Brennan's had never been. "Clara Dawson, welcome to the winning team." He toured me through the building, introducing me to everyone not as a new hire, but as the Clara Dawson, as if I were some kind of legend. The respect in their eyes was intoxicating after months of being treated like damaged goods. "This is your office," Jake said, opening a door to a corner space with views of the city skyline. I could see Northwell's tower in the distance, a daily reminder of why I was here. My team consisted of 8 analysts, all sharp, all hungry, all young enough to be my children if I'd had any. But unlike Northwell's junior staff who dismissed experience as obsolescence, these kids wanted to learn. They gathered around the conference table that first morning, notebooks out, eyes bright with ambition. "Tell us everything," said Samantha, the lead analyst. "How does Northwell approach bid proposals? What's their weakness?" I hesitated for exactly 1 second, thinking of the non-disclosure agreement gathering dust in my apartment. Then I remembered Marcus's face, how he couldn't even look at me while destroying my life. "Northwell's biggest weakness," I began, "is that they believe their reputation alone wins contracts. They've gotten lazy, complacent. They reuse proposals, changing just enough to make them seem fresh. But I know every template, every boilerplate phrase, every shortcut they take." Over the next weeks, I dissected Northwell's methodology with surgical precision. I showed Redstone how Northwell always underbid on Phase 1 to secure contracts, planning to recoup losses through change orders. I revealed their habit of overpromising on timeline deliverables, knowing they could blame delays on security clearance processing. I explained the personality quirks of every decision-maker they'd face at the Pentagon. Intelligence I'd gathered over 2 decades of meetings and negotiations. The Artemis project, I said during one strategy session, is worth $2.8 billion over 5 years. Northwell assumes they have it locked because of their history with General Morrison. But Morrison is 6 months from retirement. His replacement, Colonel Sarah Banks, has a completely different priority set. I worked with her on the Phoenix Initiative 3 years ago. What does she want? Jake asked, leaning forward. Innovation over tradition. She believes defense contracting has become stagnant, too reliant on old guard companies that resist change. She wants partners, not vendors. Northwell will pitch their experience and stability. We pitch transformation and adaptation. I spent 18-hour days rebuilding myself from the ground up, not just learning Redstone's systems, but becoming something I'd never been at Northwell. Strategic rather than just hardworking, calculating rather than just dedicated. Every piece of insider knowledge became ammunition. Every relationship I'd built became leverage. The young analysts started calling me the General. And I didn't correct them. I'd earned the title through battle scars the Northwell had inflicted. But more than strategy, I gave them something invaluable: confidence. Redstone had always been the underdog, the scrappy competitor nipping at Northwell's heels. I showed them how to be predators instead of scavengers. Northwell's preparing their Artemis proposal right now. I told Jake one evening as we reviewed our own bid. I know because they always start exactly 12 weeks before deadline, not a day earlier or later. They'll use the Morrison framework. I created it 5 years ago. 7 sections, heavy on past performance, light on innovation. They'll emphasize their existing infrastructure and cleared personnel. And we counter how. We emphasize what they can't: agility. Northwell takes 6 months to implement changes that we can execute in 6 weeks. We demonstrate that with live examples during the presentation. Real-time adaptation, something their bureaucracy simply cannot match. The transformation wasn't just professional. For the first time in 20 years, I left the office while the sun was still up some days. I joined a gym, started sleeping more than 5 hours a night, even went on a date with a divorced accountant I met at a coffee shop. He didn't know about Northwell or the firing or the revenge slowly taking shape in my corner office. To him, I was just Clara, successful professional starting an exciting new chapter. But every morning, when I looked at Northwell's tower from my window, I remembered why I was really here. Not just for a paycheck or a title or even professional satisfaction. I was here because they'd tried to destroy me. And instead, they'd created something far more dangerous. Someone with their secrets, their methods, their vulnerabilities, and absolutely nothing left to lose. You seem different, Jake observed one afternoon. More focused than I've ever seen you. 20 years at one company makes you soft, I replied. Getting fired wakes you up to what really matters. And what's that? I smiled, thinking of the Artemis presentation just 6 weeks away, of the shock that would ripple through Northwell when they lost their crown jewel contract. Winning, Jake. What matters is winning. The old Clara had believed in loyalty, dedication, building something together. The new Clara believed in something simpler. Those who live by corporate ruthlessness should die by it too. The war room at Redstone became my second home as we prepared for the Artemis bid. Whiteboards covered every wall, filled with intelligence I'd gathered over 2 decades. Not classified information, nothing illegal, just the accumulation of experience Northwell had paid me to develop and then foolishly let walk out the door. Northwell always presents third in the rotation, I told my team during one late-night session. They believe it's the power position, not too early to be forgotten, not too late when attention wanes. This time, we request to present fourth. We'll have the advantage of knowing exactly what they've pitched. Samantha looked up from her laptop. How can you be sure about their presentation order? Because Marcus Brennan is superstitious. He's presented third for every major contract since 2011. When they won the Titan project from that position, he wears the same tie, navy with gold stripes. He uses the same opening joke about Wisconsin weather. He's predictable. And in competitive bidding, predictability is death. I pulled up a framework on my tablet. Here's Northwell's standard technical approach section. I wrote this template 8 years ago. They've modified it slightly for each bid, but the core remains unchanged. Look for these key phrases: proven methodologies, established protocols, time-tested solutions. That's their tell. They're selling the past, not the future. The intelligence went deeper than presentation strategies. I knew Northwell's cost structure intimately, their overhead rates, their profit margins, where they padded budgets and where they cut corners. More importantly, I knew their blind spots. Northwell doesn't understand modular deployment, I explained to Jake as we refined our technical proposal. They still think in terms of monolithic systems because that's what they've always built. We propose a modular architecture that can be updated component by component. It's faster, cheaper, and more adaptable. Everything Colonel Banks values. You're sure about Banks? Jake asked. I'm sure. 3 years ago, during the Phoenix Initiative, she pulled me aside after Northwell's presentation. She said, "Your company makes excellent battleships, but future wars will be won by speedboats." She was frustrated by our inflexibility, but her boss at the time preferred traditional approaches. Now she's the boss. We crafted our proposal like a precision weapon, designed specifically to exploit Northwell's weaknesses, where they would emphasize their size and stability. We highlighted our agility, where they would showcase their legacy systems. We demonstrated next-generation solutions. Every strength they claimed, we reframed as a liability. But the masterstroke came from understanding Northwell's personnel decisions. They fired their most experienced project directors. I told the team, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. Replace them with junior managers who don't understand the technical complexities of defense contracting. Watch for technical gaps in their proposal, things that sound good to MBAs but will raise red flags with military engineers. I guided Redstone to hire 2 key consultants, former military officials who had worked with both companies but held no loyalty to either. One of them, retired General Patricia Hayes, had been frustrated with Northwell's inflexibility on her last project before retirement. I knew because I'd been in the room when she'd expressed that frustration, watching Marcus dismiss her concerns with corporate doublespeak. "Patricia," I said during our consultation meeting, "Redstone wants to be the partner you wished Northwell could have been, responsive, adaptive, innovative." Her eyes lit up. "That's exactly what this industry needs. I'll make some calls. Ensure the right people know Redstone is serious about change." The psychological warfare extended beyond the proposal itself. I suggested Redstone host a series of innovation workshops in the weeks before the bid, inviting key Pentagon personnel to see our capabilities firsthand. Not selling, just demonstrating. Northwell would never do this. They believed their reputation spoke for itself. Every time a decision-maker visits our facility, I explained, they're subconsciously comparing it to their last visit to Northwell's traditional headquarters. We're showing them the future, while Northwell keeps showing them the past. Late one evening, as I refined our pricing strategy, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a message from Janet, my former assistant. "They're panicking. Kyle botched the technical review. Madison's in over her head. Bradley Morrison is trying to manage it himself but doesn't understand the requirements. Thought you should know." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a surge of vindication. They'd thought they could replace 20 years of experience with youth and spreadsheets. Now they were learning the true cost of their decision. "Everything okay?" Samantha asked, noticing my expression. "Everything's perfect," I replied, deleting the message. Northwell just made a critical error in their technical review. They'll try to correct it in the final proposal, but it'll feel rushed, patched together. Make sure our technical section is flawless. No gaps, no assumptions. Every requirement addressed with specific solutions. As the proposal deadline approached, I could feel the momentum shifting. Redstone had always been hungry. But now we were focused, strategic, lethal. We weren't just competing with Northwell, we were systematically dismantling their advantages, turning their strengths into weaknesses. "You've transformed this company," Jake told me one night as we did a final review. "It's like we finally learned how to fight instead of just survive." I looked out my window at Northwell's tower, its lights burning late as they undoubtedly scrambled to fix problems they'd created by firing the people who understood their business. "I haven't transformed anything," I said. "I've just shown you what Northwell really is: vulnerable, complacent, and about to learn that experience isn't something you can put on a spreadsheet and eliminate to save costs." The day of the Artemis presentations arrived with the kind of crisp October morning that made Rockford Heights shine like a promise. The Pentagon had flown in their entire evaluation committee to our regional federal building, 15 decision-makers who would determine the future of a $2.8 billion contract. I wore my best suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, the one I'd bought with my first executive bonus at Northwell. Now it served a different purpose: armor for the battle I'd been preparing for months. Redstone's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. Northwell, as I'd predicted, had taken the 11 a.m. slot, third in the rotation, right after the morning break when attention would be fresh but not overwhelmed. I stationed myself in the federal building's public cafe on the second floor, the perfect vantage point to watch the Northwell team arrive. Marcus Brennan led the procession, wearing exactly the tie I'd described to my team, navy with gold stripes, his lucky charm for the past 13 years. Behind him, Bradley Morrison struggled with an oversized presentation case, clearly not used to doing his own heavy lifting. And there, looking terrified and underprepared, were Kyle and Madison, the junior managers who'd inherited my responsibilities and my relationships without any of my knowledge. They didn't see me at first. But then Madison glanced up, and our eyes met. The color drained from her face. She whispered urgently to Kyle, who turned and stared. Marcus followed their gaze, and for the first time since that horrible morning in Conference Room A, we made eye contact. I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast and smiled. "Clara," Marcus said, attempting authority as he approached my table, "I wasn't aware you'd be here. Public building, Marcus. Besides, Redstone likes to scout the competition. Old habits, you understand." Bradley Morrison stepped forward, his voice tight with legal concern. "You signed a non-disclosure agreement. If you've shared any proprietary..." "Proprietary?" I interrupted, my voice carrying just enough for nearby Pentagon officials to hear. "Like using the Morrison framework for Section 3 of your proposal, the one you named after yourself even though I developed it? Or proprietary like your standard cost build-up model that underestimates Phase 2 requirements by exactly 18% to make your bid more attractive?" His face reddened. "Those are trade secrets. You can't. They're methodologies I created and perfected over 20 years. Unless Northwell wants to claim they own my thoughts and experience, I'd be very careful about throwing around legal threats in a federal building full of procurement officers." General Hayes appeared at that moment, almost as if choreographed. "Clara, so good to see you. Ready for this afternoon?" "Absolutely, Patricia. Redstone's bringing something revolutionary to the table." She glanced at the Northwell team with barely concealed disdain. "Revolutionary would be refreshing. Some of these presentations feel like reruns from a decade ago." As she walked away, I stood to leave. But first, I leaned close to Marcus, speaking quietly enough that only he could hear. "Wisconsin weather joke won't land today. Marcus, Colonel Banks is from Arizona. She finds Midwest humor provincial." The doubt that flickered in his eyes was worth every sleepless night I'd endured after the firing. At 2 p.m., Jake and I led the Redstone team into the presentation room. Colonel Banks sat at the center of the evaluation panel, her expression neutral but alert. I recognized most of the faces, people I'd briefed over the years, relationships Northwell had taken for granted. Good afternoon, Jake began. We're not here to tell you about our past. We're here to show you the future. What followed was 60 minutes of precision-targeted demolition. Every slide, every demonstration, every technical specification was designed to highlight what Northwell couldn't offer. We didn't mention them by name. We didn't have to. The contrasts were clear. When we demonstrated our modular system architecture, updating components in real time during the presentation, several evaluators leaned forward. Northwell's monolithic systems would take months to update. When we showed our AI-assisted threat detection, processing data streams that would overwhelm traditional systems. Colonel Banks made a note in her tablet. But the killing blow came during the cost proposal. We understand the government's budget constraints, I said, taking the lead for this section. That's why we're proposing a performance-based pricing model. You only pay full price when we deliver full value. If we're late, if we're over budget, if we don't meet specifications, we absorb those costs, not the taxpayers. It was a risk Northwell would never take. They relied on change orders and contract modifications to maintain their profit margins. I knew because I'd written those change orders for 2 decades. During the Q&A, Colonel Banks looked directly at me. Ms. Dawson, you recently joined Redstone after a long tenure elsewhere. How do we know Redstone has the institutional knowledge to manage a project of this scope? I'd been waiting for this question. Colonel, institutional knowledge isn't about how long a company has existed. It's about understanding what works, what doesn't, and having the courage to abandon failed approaches. Redstone hired me and others precisely because we bring that knowledge, but more importantly, we bring the freedom to implement it without 20 years of bureaucratic resistance. Could you elaborate on that? Traditional contractors often become prisoners of their own success. They can't innovate because they're protecting legacy systems, legacy contracts, legacy thinking. Redstone has the expertise without the baggage. We can be the partner the military needs for tomorrow's conflicts, not yesterday's. As we packed up, I overheard one evaluator whisper to another. That's the first presentation in 5 years that didn't put me to sleep. Walking out, we passed the Northwell team in the lobby. They were huddled in heated discussion. Bradley Morrison gesturing angrily at a tablet while Kyle and Madison stood silent, looking like children caught in a storm they didn't understand. Marcus broke away from the group and approached me. You planned this, he said quietly. From the moment you joined Redstone. No. Marcus, I replied. You planned this the moment you decided I was expendable. I'm just the consequence you didn't calculate for. The call came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon that had started like any other. I was reviewing deployment schedules when Jake burst into my office, his face split by the biggest grin I'd ever seen. We got it, he said simply. We got Artemis. The words hung in the air for a moment before their weight hit me. $2.8 billion. The largest contract in Redstone's history. The contract Northwell had assumed was theirs by divine right. The debrief call is in an hour, Jake continued. Colonel Banks specifically requested you be on it. Apparently, our proposal was rated exceptional in every category. Northwell's was rated acceptable in most, marginal in cost realism. Marginal in cost realism. My strategy had worked perfectly. Without someone who understood the true costs of implementation, Northwell had done exactly what I'd predicted, underbid to win, planning to recoup through modifications. But Colonel Banks had seen through it. The debrief call was a masterstroke of professional vindication. Colonel Banks was direct in her feedback. Redstone demonstrated innovation and adaptability that align with our modernization goals. The modular architecture, the performance-based pricing, the real-time capabilities. This is what we need moving forward. But the subtext was clear in what she said about the other proposals, without naming names. Some vendors seemed to be resting on their laurels, offering yesterday's solutions with a fresh coat of paint. The evaluation committee was unanimous. We need partners who can evolve, not institutions frozen in time. Within hours, the news exploded through the defense contracting community. Northwell's stock dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Redstone's valuation jumped by 30% overnight, but the real devastation was yet to come. The next morning, the Wall Street Journal ran a story. Northwell Dynamics loses flagship contract to upstart rival. The article was brutal, questioning Northwell's recent restructuring decisions and specifically mentioning the departure of key technical personnel as a potential factor in their loss. My phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues, some congratulating me, others fishing for information, a few openly bitter. I ignored them all except one, a call from Janet, my former assistant. "Clara, it's chaos here," she whispered. "Emergency board meeting. Marcus is fighting for his job. Bradley Morrison already got fired this morning. They're saying the technical gaps in the proposal were catastrophic." "I'm sorry you're caught in this, Janet." "I'm not," she said firmly. "I'm resigning today. After what they did to you, watching this comeuppance, it's poetic justice." "Oh, and Clara?" "Kyle and Madison were let go an hour ago. Turns out they couldn't explain the technical failures to the board. The irony was razor sharp. They'd fired me to hire cheaper replacements, and now those replacements were being fired for failing at the job I'd mastered." But the true reckoning came the following week, during a congressional subcommittee hearing on defense procurement that I watched from my office. Marcus Brennan was called to testify about Northwell's loss and its implications for their other contracts. He sat at the witness table, looking older than his 61 years, that lucky tie nowhere to be seen. Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the subcommittee, didn't pull punches. "Mr. Brennan, can you explain how a company with Northwell's reputation and resources lost such a critical contract to a significantly smaller competitor?" Marcus's response was corporate doublespeak about evolving market conditions and strategic recalibration. But Senator Williams interrupted. "Isn't it true that Northwell recently terminated several senior technical directors with decades of experience? Directors who were replaced with junior staff? We underwent a restructuring to optimize." "Yes or no, Mr. Brennan? Did you fire experienced personnel and replace them with cheaper, less experienced staff?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that one of those terminated employees now works for Redstone Systems?" Marcus's pause spoke volumes. "Yes." "So you fired the expertise, and your competitor hired it? Is that what you call optimizing operations?" The hearing continued for 2 more hours, each question another nail in Northwell's coffin. Other contracts were being reviewed. Their competency was being questioned. The Pentagon was reconsidering their vendor ratings. That evening, Jake invited the entire Redstone team for champagne. As we toasted our victory, he pulled me aside. "You know what the beautiful part is," he said. "We won this completely fairly. Better proposal, better price, better solution. All you did was show us how to compete properly." He was right, technically. Everything Redstone had proposed was our own innovation, our own work. I'd simply provided the intelligence to position it perfectly, to know exactly where to apply pressure to shatter Northwell's armor. As I drove home that night, I passed Northwell's tower. Half the lights were off, unusual for a company that once prided itself on working around the clock. Their logo, which had always been illuminated in bold blue letters, seemed dimmer somehow, as if even the building itself knew the empire was crumbling. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Clara?" The voice was broken, defeated. "Marcus Brennan." "Marcus." "The board fired me an hour ago, effective immediately, 28 years. And they gave me 10 minutes to clear my desk." The parallel to my own dismissal wasn't lost on either of us. "I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus." And I found, surprisingly, that I meant it. My revenge was complete. I could afford magnanimity. I wanted to say, "We were wrong. I was wrong. Firing you was the biggest mistake of my career." "Yes," I said simply. "It was." There was a long pause. "Redstone will get more contracts now. Defense likes backing winners. You've essentially destroyed us." No, Marcus, you destroyed yourselves the moment you decided experience was expendable. I just showed the world what that decision really cost. He hung up without saying goodbye. 6 months after the Artemis victory, I stood at the window of my new office, corner suite, top floor of Redstone's expanded headquarters. We'd grown by 40%. Acquiring talent from Northwell's exodus and winning 3 more major contracts that would have automatically gone to them a year ago. The David had not just defeated Goliath, we'd taken his armor and worn it better. The morning news played on my tablet. Northwell Dynamics announces bankruptcy filing. Their tower, that monument to corporate arrogance where I'd spent 20 years, would be sold to cover debts. The company would be broken up, its contracts redistributed, its legacy reduced to a cautionary tale told in business schools about the cost of valuing spreadsheets over people. Jake knocked and entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Did you see? I saw. Any regrets? I considered the question. Did I regret the destruction of the company I'd helped build? Did I regret the hundreds of innocent employees who'd lost their jobs in Northwell's collapse? They had a choice, I said finally. Every step of the way, they had a choice. They chose to treat people as disposable assets. They chose to value short-term savings over long-term expertise. They chose to create their own enemy. And you chose to become that enemy. No, I corrected him. I chose to stop being their victim. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Kyle, one of the junior managers who'd replaced me, had posted about learning from failure and growing through adversity. He was unemployed, his profile desperately marked open to work. Madison had left the industry entirely. Last I heard, Bradley Morrison was fighting lawsuits from Northwell shareholders who blamed him for the company's downfall. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the future, Redstone's future, my future. At 43, I'd rebuilt myself from the ashes of corporate betrayal into something stronger. Not just a survivor, but a winner. That afternoon, I gave a presentation to a room full of new hires, many of them refugees from Northwell's collapse. Young faces mixed with experienced ones, all looking for fresh starts and second chances. Everyone in this room has a choice, I told them. You can be loyal to a company that sees you as a line item, or you can be loyal to yourself and your value. Never forget that corporations are not families. They're not friends. They're entities that exist to generate profit. The moment you stop generating more value than you cost, they will discard you without hesitation. So why work for any company? Asked a young engineer in the front row. Because we need them as much as they need us. But it's a transaction, not a marriage. Bring your skills, your innovation, your dedication. Take your salary, your experience, your growth. And always, always have an exit strategy, because I promise you, they have one for you. After the presentation, I walked out to my car. A new Tesla I'd bought with my signing bonus, the kind of luxury I'd never allowed myself during my Northwell years, always saving, always anxious about the future. The future was here now, and it was mine. The parking lot offered a perfect view of downtown Rockford Heights. Northwell's tower stood dark against the sunset, their logo removed just that morning, leaving only the ghost of letters on the building's facade. By next month, it would house a medical company, something life-giving rather than life-taking. My phone rang, an unknown number with a California area code. Ms. Dawson, this is Jennifer Park from Tech Defense Weekly. We're doing a feature on the Northwell collapse and Redstone's rise. Would you be willing to comment? What's your angle? The human story. How one woman's termination led to the downfall of a billion-dollar corporation and the rise of a new industry leader. I thought about it for a moment. I have only one comment. Companies should remember that when they fire employees, they're not just eliminating positions. They're creating competitors, critics, and sometimes their own executioners. Expertise has value. Experience has value, and treating people as disposable has consequences. That's quite a powerful statement. It's just the truth. I hung up and drove home to my new house, not the loft where I'd mourned my corporate death, but a real home with a garden and a home office where I worked reasonable hours. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my porch, and watched the sun set over Rockford Heights. 20 years at Northwell had taught me to build. 6 months at Redstone had taught me to win. But the 6 months between, those dark, desperate months when I'd been discarded like obsolete equipment, those had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. In corporate America, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about success. It's about taking everything they said you couldn't do, everything they believed you weren't worth, and proving them catastrophically wrong. It's about transforming their rejection into your fuel, their mistake into your opportunity. Northwell Dynamics died because they forgot a fundamental truth. The people you step on while climbing the ladder might be the ones holding it steady. And when you push them off, sometimes they take the whole ladder with them when they fall. I raised my glass to the darkened tower in the distance, a monument to corporate hubris and the price of treating people as expendable resources. "Thank you," I whispered to the ghost of Northwell. "Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the motivation. Thank you for setting me free." The next morning would bring new challenges, new contracts to win, new heights for Redstone to reach. But tonight, I sat in the peace of complete vindication, living proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well. It's living well while watching those who wronged you lose everything they valued more than you. They'd fired me after 2 decades, thinking they were cutting costs. Instead, they'd cut their own throat. And I'd handed them the knife. Thank you for listening to my story of corporate revenge and redemption. If you're listening to this tale of workplace justice, I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect over these shared experiences of corporate life. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace loyalty, second chances, or your own experiences with corporate injustice. Your stories matter too, and this community is here to listen.